So he gave me the mic. I didn't know the mantra. He just.
Haven't you learned the mantra from the lady in Kareli?
I had learned the mantra, but that was like 3 months before, and we had done just maybe 3 or 4 kirtans, and it's not, the Maha Mantra did not take a big position in my life back then. And it goes to show, even though Maha Mantra is independent and, totally pure, still, if it's chanted by someone who's Krishna conscious, it has more of an effect, right? So, hearing it from actually practicing Vaishnavas, which she wasn't at the time. Funny enough, she later on came around 20 years later to become a devotee of Krishna. That's another story. So as I was riding back I got to ride back to my home and to my apartment, and when I got back to my apartment, I felt like, what just happened? And I really felt, I like this analogy, it felt like let's say I was like a janitor at the CIA's, headquarters in Washington, D.C., or in some hidden location that no one even knows about. And I'm just a Shudra janitor who just comes after hours and just, has his routine of cleaning the floors without asking any questions and just goes home. But on one such, cleaning day, the main door, let's say, to all the classified, top secret files happens to be open. And so out of curiosity, really, just walks in there and just starts looking at files on the desk that are open. And at that time, the head of the operation comes in and says, "What are you doing here?" And says, "I'm sorry, the door was open. And the guy says, "Well, you know what? I'm sorry to tell you, but from now, because you've read these documents, your life will never be the same. You can never go back to your regular life." And even though I couldn't materialize it in words, I had a deep feeling that this is, I'm going on some adventure here that I have no way to go back. If I'm honest with myself, I can't just classify what I just experienced as some ordinary sense perception entertainment event, like seeing a movie or going to an opera or going to see a theater or going to a concert or going to have a coffee with a friend or This was like an experience that was so unique, hearing this Krishna Katha and this Kirtan, and that I felt if I'm at all honest with myself, I don't know where this is going to lead me, but I have to, I'm part of this now. That's kind of how I felt. Now the devotees happened to have a preaching center, a little center right next to the Sorbonne, fortunately about 10 minutes away from where I lived. And they had programs 3 times a week, Bhagavad Gita class, Kirtan, Prasadam, what else? And so I started going every Monday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And someone gave me some beads. I started chanting the Maha Mantra regularly. I stopped smoking. I remember I was smoking cigarettes, and I had already wanted to stop. I remember one day, during those days, I woke up and my phlegm was green, because I had been smoking like a pack of Marlboros for about a year. I was young, but fortunately I didn't start smoking that young. But I had smoked for about a year, and I realized, oh my God, no way. So from that was the last cigarette the night before was the last cigarette I ever smoked. So I used to go to the center, I got beads, got my first Bhagavad Gita, and I would sit and listen to these different devotees give talks about Krishna, Shravanam Kirtanam. What is it? Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kavanoi Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karayudoi. And then I remember I went to the temple I would go to the temple on Sundays. And one devotee, one brahmachari who was there at the time from Croatia, gave me a BBT publication book, a big book called The Nectar of Book Distribution, which was a book that the North European BBT had published in the early 1990s, which was a big old book full of quotes from Prabhupada about the importance of outreach, about the importance of distributing Krishna consciousness, about the importance of distributing his own books, with testimonies from different devotees who distributed books mostly in Europe. And so before I had even read the Bhagavad Gita, I hadn't read the Bhagavad Gita, I read this Nectar of Book Distribution, which in a way gave me an immediate sort of insight into the heart of Prabhupada, or into the heart of what I would claim is, the heart of all the Vaiṣṇava-acharyas, and ultimately the heart of Krishna, which is, compassion towards conditioned souls, and the intense desire to share Krishna consciousness with those who don't know about Krishna. So from the very beginning of my spiritual life, and before even knowing basic tenets of, before even having read the Bhagavad Gita, I had read all these excerpts from letters and conversations and purports in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Bhagavatam about the importance of distributing Krishna consciousness. And so I remember one day, I was like, okay, so I bought 20 Bhagavad Gitas. I had never read the book yet. I bought 20 Bhagavad Gitas, and I had a collection of about 60 CDs, music CDs. This was before the internet, this was before MP3s. So you had CDs, actual albums, right, of music I listened to as a non-devotee. And I was a big fan of the 1970s rock scene, which some claim was the best era in modern, popular music in the West, precisely because Prabhupada was on the planet. That's a nice claim I heard made by the saxophone player of Indradumna Swami's Polish tour. Anyway, so I had all these CDs from Bob Marley to Janis Joplin to Led Zeppelin. By the way, I gave a Bhagavad Gita to Robert Plant, the singer of Led Zeppelin, some years later at the LA airport. Michael Jackson, Lenny Kravitz. I mean, I had a whole Eurythmic stuff from the 80s, Prince. So I had a whole bunch of CDs. So I put them all in my backpack. And I had 20 Bhagavad Gitas. And I went to the intersection of Boulevard Saint-Germain and Boulevard Saint-Michel, right where the Sorbonne is. And I plopped the two bags on the floor. And I said, free CDs! So all of a sudden, all these, kind of young people came. And what are you talking about? Yeah. You get 2 of these CDs, any one of your choice for free. But you have to buy this book too, otherwise you don't get the CDs. And I think the Bhagavad Gita cost X francs. It was before euros, and so I just let them fly at cost price. And so within no time they made well, how much is the book? 16 francs or whatever. And they're like, yeah, it was a no-brainer because used CDs cost way more in used CD shops. So they're like, okay, I'll take whatever Led Zeppelin greatest hits, and I'll take. Carlos Santana. I'll take the Beatles, but you have to take. No, I don't want the book. No, you have to take the book. Okay, so within 10 minutes, all the CDs were gone and all the Bhagavad Gitas were gone. And so that was my first experience in passing out Prabhupada's books to people. That was sweet. So after a few months of going to college and really not feeling excited about it, my dear temple president, who I forgave since, told me, hey, he basically said, look, forget school, forget university. It's useless, it's not important. You should become a devotee or you should join the ashram, in other words. Because back then, right, certainly in the 70s and going all the way up to the mid-90s, becoming a devotee meant joining the ashram. There was no, Gyane prayasamudapasyanamanta eva jivanti sanmukaritam bhavadiya, stane stitaha, just remain at home and add Krishna into your life. No, that concept, for one reason or other, really wasn't part of the strategy, the outreach strategy of the Hare Krishna movement. So I kind of caught the last part of the wave of, hey, you like Krishna? Well, join the ashram, right? So from one day to the other, I dropped out of Cornell University and the Sorbonne without even telling my parents. And I moved to New Mayapur on the 31st of January of 1993. New Mayapur is our farm community in central France near Châteauroux. And I did a bhakta program there, and shaved my head and put on the shika and the white dhotis and the white kurtas and the samsara dava and the dehinosmin yata, all the basics of Krishna consciousness, cutting vegetables and cleaning the toilet and cold showers and all that. And my parents flipping out that, our dear Cyril has joined the sect or has joined the cult, because the anti-cult thing was still quite prominent in those days for, in some ways, good reasons. I mean, when you strip someone out of his social context and don't even tell him, hey, maybe you should tell your parents, obviously you're going to get a reputation of being a cult, So in some way, these cult, anti-cult agencies had some, some objective reasons for criticizing the Hare Krishnas in some ways, So while I'm in New Mayapur, I got the association of Paramgati Maharaj, the GBC for France at the time, from Brazil, and I came across these Mayapur magazines, and in those days there was a Mayapur magazine, a small little magazine that had pictures of the Mayapur festival basically. And when I saw that, I really felt a strong desire to go to Mayapur, and it was close to the GBC meeting, so I told Paramgati Swami, can I maybe go with you to India And he's like, yeah, it's a good idea. So I asked my dad, and he, thank him, gave me the money to buy a flight. I bought a round ticket to Mayapur, to Calcutta. And so I had been to Egypt, I had been to Guatemala, I had been to Mexico, I had been all over Europe, I had been to the Seychelles Islands, to Mauritius. I had traveled a lot, for an 18-year-old kid, but I had never been to Asia, and I had never been to India. And I thought, yeah, India's gonna be, walk in the park, les doigts dans le nez, as they say in French, your fingers in your nose, which literally means a walk in the park, like no problem. And I remember when we landed in Calcutta, and the stench, it was not a stench is a heavy word, but the strong smell of human sweat and humidity and spices and all the things that float around in the atmosphere of Calcutta just hit me right in the face. And I remember that ride we took from the airport to the house of Chaitanya Das, one of the first disciples of Bhakti Charu Swami, who comes from a very respected Brahmin family, a professor at Calcutta University. I remember seeing, these ambassador cars and people sleeping on the streets, and just, it was such a culture shock. And then going to Mayapur and seeing these life-size deities of Radha Madhava and all these hundreds and hundreds of devotees dancing and going crazy in kirtan. And I got attacked by a Brahma Rakshasa ghost during the parikrama. Then I won't give you the details, but basically, I've never had epilepsy before or after, but I got literally I ended up in the Calcutta hospital almost dying by suffocation. Someone later told me that he's 15 years later, when I was in Mauritius, I met a Prabhupada disciple there called Arjuna Prabhu, who during the course of a lunch said, I remember about 1993 I was in Mayapur, and I like to do exorcism and stuff, and so they told me, hey, listen, Arjuna Prabhu, there's this new bhakta in Calcutta hospital who's been attacked by a ghost, you should really go help him out. And when he said that, I was like, he's talking about me. So I said, oh really? Well, what was it like? So he's like, oh yeah, I went to the Calcutta hospital, and there was this poor guy, this poor bhakta, 18, 20-year-old, and when I started chanting his Nishinga mantras to him, he started screaming, like this deep, raucous voice, which was not his own, spoke through him, and his neck was bent halfway, his eyes were flipping, he was literally bouncing horizontally up and down on the bed. I'd never seen this. The doctor was in the corner, with his white doctor suit, frozen in shock. And I said, well, you know what, Arjuna Prabhu, that was me. And he's like, what, is that real? That was you? I said, yeah, it really was. So when I went back to France, my mother flew, and she took me to the hospital. Imagine the first impressions are lasting. My dear mom, she saw her son almost dying from a we couldn't, it was really, I believe in ghosts. Our scriptures speak of ghosts, and even Mayapur has a history of very strong sort of entities living there, and unembodied living entities living in sort of a resort for ghosts, which is Mayapur. Of course, if you chant the holy name, they can't really do much, we hear. But anyway, when I went back to France, I was still disturbed by this ghost. I couldn't go to the temple. Every time I would go to the temple, I would start foaming at the mouth. It was really crazy. You could see this in a movie. So then my father said, you know what, I'm flying, you go back to I'm sending you to Los Angeles. I can't deal with you, literally. So he bought me a one-way ticket to LA, and this flight from Paris to LA, and I heard later that ghosts don't follow you on a large distance of water. And when you fly from Paris to LA, you basically go through the whole Atlantic, so it's a lot of water. When I landed in LA, nothing, as if nothing happened. I went to my mom took me to the temple, nothing. And I never, for 26 years later, still nothing. But that initial first experience in India was really intense. So my mom took me to the temple, and I joined the Brahmacharya ashram there. I did another second Bhakta program, and at that time some Sankirtan devotees were passing through to distribute Prabhupada's books at some rock concert, and the temple president said, well, yeah, why don't you just go and distribute books with them? And so I went, and I did really well. And so next thing I know, I'm on traveling Sankirtan on the east coast of America, going from university to university campuses, undercover as students, with our backpacks, pretending to be students, but actually passing out Bhagavad Gitas to students. I did that for a few months, and then went back to LA, and then for 5 years, Los Angeles airport, 6 days a week. Excuse me, are you flying in or are you flying out? That was the mantra I said a million times to people who are either flying in, from some city, or flying out to some city. This was pre-9/11, so you were allowed to bring literally hundreds of books past security into the terminal of the airport and just set up your books. We had a non-profit card, so we were allowed to even distribute books and even ask for donations for them. I don't want to talk about the donation part of book distribution, but So we, bring hundreds of books past security every day, and excuse me, are you flying out or flying out? Are you flying in or flying out? Yeah, well, we're showing this to everybody, and then we show them the same mantra of Prabhupada's books, and I did that for 5 years, and I was the #1 book distributor in America in 1996. And during the summer, we would travel around rock concerts and distribute books like that. And then we, built some really strong friendships among us. Most of us went on and got married and went in different ways in life, but we're still very, close when we think about those memories. So by that time, quickly, just to conclude, Krishna says in the Gita that everyone acts according to his nature. And I have an intellectual element in my psychophysical makeup.
What about your initiation?
My initiated, yes, I got initiated by Bhakti Chaumar. So, he stayed in touch with me even during that sort of 2 months turbulent time and when I got attacked by a ghost. and I heard his lectures and heard lectures of different initiating gurus, and so I just felt like, I want to take initiation from him,
During your time in LA?
I was a brahmachari in Los Angeles, and then he said, you can take initiation in Mayapur. So, the next year, or 1997, or 1995, I went to Mayapur again, didn't get attacked by a ghost, it went well this time. And I got initiated, Bhakti Chaumar gave me initiation the day after Gaur Purnima in Prabhupada's Samadhi. I was the only white guy ever getting initiated. There was only one initiation ceremony ever performed in that Samadhi, and there were all like 17 Bengalis and one white guy, and so I was the only Westerner to ever have gotten initiated in that Samadhi of Prabhupada. So I took my vows in front of that deity of Prabhupada. I went back to LA and did more book distribution. But by 1999, 2000, Bhakti Chaumar was involved in Abhay Charan, in that television series on the life of Prabhupada based on the Lilamrita. And I had been a drama major in high school. I had done like 4 years of theater, and I knew how to act, and it's my nature to be in front of a camera or in front of an audience. And he needed actors, and I was getting tired of saying, excuse me, are you flying in, are you flying out every day? Although these years of book distribution were the most mystical experiences I've ever had in my life, where I felt the most intensely united with Lord Chaitanya, no question. But still, I felt like it was difficult. It's difficult, go to the same place with the same air conditioning, the same voices of, flight number 62, gate number 33, boarding now, really all day long for 5 years. It's intense. So at that time I asked Bhakti Chaumar if I could, act in Abhay Charan. He said, yeah. So they traded me. When you're a brahmachari, you get traded, like LeBron James get traded to the, Miami Heat and I don't know what. Another player gets traded. I mean, that's kind of what you are. So I was traded to Bhakti Chaumar's personal sort of Abhay Charan film, and I played, all of a sudden I was, acting as Shyamasundar, the actor who played the role of Shyamasundar, the famous Prabhupada disciple who went to London with his wife and Yamuna and Gurdas and Mukunda Maharaj and started the whole yatra in England. And so we had fun filming this over a year or two. And then we filmed in India, we filmed in Ahmedabad, we filmed in South Africa, we filmed in Paris, we filmed in Italy, we filmed in New Vrindavan. And then I just, one day I was reading a Vyasa Puja offering from Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, where he quotes Prabhupada saying that, the spiritual master should be served physically while he's, physically present. So I thought, I don't want to go back to LA, and I like being with Bhakti Chaumar, so I asked him if I could continue as his assistant, and he said yeah. So for the next 3 or 4 years, I was Bhakti Chaumar's personal servant. I probably spent more time physically with him than with any of his disciples, actually. Anyway.
There was a time when he went to visit your parents, no? There's a picture he took you to meet your parents?
Yeah, because you see, at the end of those 3 or 4 years with Bhakti Chaumar, where I traveled all over the world, and he really opened up the world of ISKCON to me, because until then I had just seen, France a little bit, India, and that's it, in Los Angeles. But now all of a sudden I was traveling with this sannyasi to South Africa, to all over Europe, all over India, and so it was a very enriching experience. But as I said, at one point I had this, this intellectual tendency, and my parents were still completely disappointed that I had given up, my university studies, and I was.
Talking about your trips with Indranila Swami?
That comes later.
Oh, that comes later.
Or maybe that comes first. Yeah, actually, so because there's all these obstacles for me going back to college. Not obstacles, but stuff that happened. I couldn't Ah, no.